Welcome to the Painting of the Week podcast, where we look at some of the most significant paintings throughout history. Introducing your hosts, Phil Grabsky and Laura Bentham.
Welcome to this week's Painting of the Week. And today we are going to talk about arguably one of the, well, some might say one of the top 10 paintings ever. There was an Illustrated News article, when was it? I don't know, late 80s maybe, 1980s, that said this was the greatest painting ever. That's pretty bold. But anyway, it is Las Meninas by Diego Velazquez. And it is in the Prado in Madrid. As ever, if you are in a position to and you want to look at the painting while we talk about it, then if you go to the 7th-art.com website and just click on the podcast, then you can go straight through to the painting. Or if you go to YouTube and look up Painting of the Week, then you can listen to us and see the picture. Literally, the picture just holds there while we talk. Unlike our films, which are much more complicated, this is really very straightforward. Oh. Now, right. Las Meninas. I think there is arguably so much that one can say about Las Meninas. But I think my angle on this is well, actually, why have we chosen Las Meninas? I think it was one of my suggestions this for this season, because I'm always intrigued by paintings that are considered to be great, or indeed the greatest. And in a way, that's what I'd like to explore, rather than kind of going through saying, well, this, you know, the lady on the right, her name is this, and the lady on the left, her name is this, and
well, that's my notes out the window now.
Oh no,
that's all I had.
But knowing the names, knowing the names of her maids, Las Meninas, is one thing. It doesn't really explain why this painting is so highly valued and considered. We'll come on to that. I did live in Madrid for a year, and went to the Prado then, and I've been back since. It is a magnificent painting. It's a big painting. It's, from memory, something like 3 meters plus by 276 meters. It's a big painting. And bear that in mind when you look at the canvas on the left, which is, a clue, I think, to maybe re-evaluating the painting. Anyway, Laura.
Yes.
Tell me what first impressions. What do you think of this painting? Let's start there.
Oh, Phil. I've got notes here, and thank goodness you've given me a cup of tea, because
swimming in notes.
I was swimming in notes, and I'm swimming in tea, because I could be here. I looked at this painting, and this is the best painting in the world, according to so many people. Hundreds of books being written on it. I love that. Articles, people analysing it. And I'm trying to make sense of why it's the best painting in the world. And now, of course, I've spent a bit of time, and I absolutely love it, of course. But is it because, or now we're going to try and discuss that, what you just said, that it's because for the since it was painted, all anyone's done is try to work out what messages were trying to come from it, mysteries, intrigue, who's in the mirror, what is he painting? Is he actually, that massive canvas, does anyone actually know what he was painting, or is he painting this painting on it?
Okay, so that's really interesting, because there is sometimes the thought, well, there's different ways this painting is interpreted. I'll tell you what we do know.
Good.
Diego Velazquez was, he is a great artist. He's one of the great artists, and he's the court artist
Yeah.
At this point, it's Philip IV. And they live in Madrid, and they live in a palace called the Alcazar. This is Diego's studio within that palace. Now, if you've been to any old buildings and old homes, the idea, these days we have corridors and we have privacy. That wasn't really the case back in the day. You would have to walk through rooms to get to rooms.
Okay.
So what we know about this actually is that the king and queen had to walk through this room to get to their own bedroom. It's plausible that this is actually the next room. It is said that Diego Velazquez, he's more than the court painter. He actually is responsible for getting the king up in the morning, for putting him to bed at night. He's really quite integral to palace life. But this is his room, and he's also the curator of the king's art collection. We won't go into detail, but there's some quite dark paintings on the wall behind. But they are people know what they are. They're recognisable. They were part. He's depicting paintings that were in the royal collection at that time. As an aside, and this comes up in our My National Gallery film, monarchs liked to collect art. Mm. And sometimes that's through commissioning, sometimes that's through purchasing, and all too often, sadly, it's through conquest. So, Napoleon, when he's on campaign, he has as part of his train, right at the back with those in charge of the logistics and medics, he has people who are there to collect steel, basically art.
Yeah.
I think I might have mentioned this before in a podcast. At one point they were even thinking of taking the wall from Milan on which the Last Supper is painted. Then they realised if they tried, the whole thing would just crumble.
Yeah.
But they took plenty of art back, and we have plenty of examples. Now, the big difference historically is that there is a revolution in France, and so the art collection is nationalised, if you like, and becomes the basis for the Louvre. And actually, the similar thing happens in Spain ultimately, and so the royal collection becomes essentially the collection in the Prado. It never really happens in Britain, and the royal collection, our royalty have kept a close eye on their art collection. So you have the royal collection,
yeah,
and then you have the establishment 200 years ago of the national, a national gallery.
Is the royal collection in Buckingham Palace then?
It's a mix of Buckingham Palace and Windsor, and
okay.
there'll be paintings dotted about
all over.
But our royal collection never made its way into a national collection.
Oh, okay.
Anyway, so this is his studio in the Alcazar.
Yeah.
And I think one of the appeals of this painting, and this, again, we've talked about this so often, great paintings, sometimes they can have an immediate visceral impact, let's say like the Impressionists, where they're colourful and they're full of life, and you know immediately what's going on. It's a couple dancing, it's somebody on a boat, it's somebody walking through poppy fields with their child. Actually, the Impressionists, the more you look at them, the deeper those paintings go, but you get it immediately. It's why we struggle these days with some of the religious paintings, say, in the National Gallery, because we don't understand the codes. Who is that person being crucified upside down, or why is that person, got arrows coming out of him, or beating his chest with a, back in the day, people knew exactly who those people were. Yeah. We don't so much now, so they're confusing to us. They may be also a little bit, to our eyes, quite uncomfortable to look at or offensive. Or anyway, I think part of the appeal of this is not a traditional. If he was planning to paint the king and queen, yeah. This is about as non-traditional a portrait as you could possibly make. I don't think it is a portrait of the king and queen. So, the king and queen.
Oh God, I feel a book coming on, Phil.
They've been.
Everyone.
You could stack a book. Books on Las Meninas and articles, and they just.
And videos. There's so many.
So many. But okay, that's what we know. Mm. In the back, you have a rather indistinct couple in a frame. Okay, that they are the king and queen.
Yep.
Now, part of the appeal of this painting is, okay, hold on a minute, is that a portrait, which is slightly blurry for whatever reason? Is it a mirror? So are we the king and queen? Have we just entered? Are we entering the room and everyone's looking at us? And there's a guy at the back there, and his job, again, we know who that is, his job was to open doors, So is he opening the door, the curtain, pulling back the curtain, and opening the door to the king and queen's bedroom, assuming they slept in the same room, but anyway, to certainly the king's bedchamber. So is that a mirror?
Mm-hmm. Well, that makes perfect sense.
Maybe it could also be a window. It could also be, it could be a window, though I don't think that's very plausible.
No.
There is no, there is no portrait, double portrait like that exists. I mean, that would make it really easy if that portrait existed. And then people have said, well, okay, maybe that's a mirror. So the king and queen are standing here and being painted. Yeah, but look at the size of the canvas. That canvas is way too big, so that can't be what's happening. There's another thing about Velazquez which is interesting, is that one of his jobs was actually to create a hall of mirrors. So, and if you think of Versailles has this wonderful hall of mirrors, and it's not unique for that. So, there's certainly mirrors knocking about, and they know about mirrors, and he's happy to. So, my own opinion on this is that probably the idea is that the king and queen have just entered and everyone's having a peek at them as they come through. There is an alternative, which I think is quite interesting, which is that... But then what is being painted?
Yeah.
Well, what's being painted is probably this painting, which is what makes it interesting.
Oh, okay.
And so there's an alternative, which is that actually what Velazquez... Okay, so I should point out, for those of you that don't realise this, the artist Velazquez, that's a self-portrait. There he is. And he's a very handsome chap. He's actually only, 3 or 4 years. This is 56?
Yeah, 50, yes.
Oh, 1656.
Sorry, yes. Oh, yes.
And he dies in 1660, doesn't he? So,
yes.
He's not far. He's not got long to live, but he looks very robust and healthy in this painting. But here's an interesting idea. Maybe what he's looking at is a very large mirror. I'm not quite sure why he would do that, actually. But if this is a large mirror, I suppose it might make... So if he's looking at a mirror, and then he's looking at these characters... looking in the mirror, and what he's painting is the reflection in the mirror. Okay, why would he do that as opposed to just painting them? I guess you'd get them a different way around, wouldn't you?
Oh, okay. Well, I read and watched. I feel like I spent 3 weeks on this.
Good, well done.
And so one of the things he felt, people felt, was as an artist, he wasn't, even though he'd been there for 30 some odd years in the court, he still wasn't recognised as much as musicians, poets, writers and things. So to create one of his final masterpieces, which wasn't a portrait, your average portrait, he then painted this painting, which, if people are still saying is one of the most greatest paintings in the world... I mean, that's great, isn't it?
Okay.
He's achieved
something
there.
What contradicts that theory that you've read, though, is that he was the person tasked with getting the king up in the morning and putting him to bed.
See, I didn't know that, Phil.
So that, I can't remember if he's called the master of the bedchamber.
Right.
Because, I think, and he paints 16, 17, 18 portraits of the king.
Yeah.
He was really, and he's honest about the way they look. I think he's pretty. There's a great Spanish word that I've never really been able to properly translate. Enchufe, I think it's called, which means plugged in. Right. He's integrated into this palace life. I mean, there's another theory about what he's trying to achieve here, which we'll come on to. Mm-hmm. But I think part of the appeal of it, anyway, is you're not quite sure.
Yeah.
So, is he looking at the king and queen? Oh, I mean, the obvious explanation is that the king and queen are coming through, And all these characters that he's painting have all turned round. I mean, that darling little girl, the princess, she's 5 years old, but she's very composed. I mean, look at her face and the way she's holding herself.
Uh-oh.
The two maids either side.
Yeah.
And there's loads of other little details, all these little spots of red. So there's a little red pot being offered to her. And, you might read she's been offered a glass of water, but then somebody else talks about the fact that actually it's a skin whitening treatment.
Oh, okay.
And later in life you see this, as this girl grows up, she's always painted with very white skin.
Who knows? Yeah.
You've got the two people on the right who, again, we know who they were. They were very much part of palace life. The male character on the right is giving the dog a kick to try and wake him up. I mean, there's so much going on.
The dog's had enough.
dogs
He probably knows how many years that people are going to be talking about the painting.
But I mean, also, painting a dog. I mean,
yeah.
Get frustrated with a human moving. Dog's not going to stand still. Then you got a nun talking to maybe a guard. We know historically that this painting was suffered from a fire that there was in the Alcazar, and that the right-hand side of the painting was damaged, which is partly the explanation for why that's quite dark. It has been restored, but again, I've read that that's part of the reason. Also, if I understood correctly, they had to cut it out of the frame, so there's sections of it missing, a little bit on either side. So I don't know what we would have seen. I mean, on the left, I guess you would have seen more of the. I mean, it feels beautifully composed.
Completely.
But I mean, I guess you would have had more of the back of the easel.
Yeah. Okay.
And I don't know if anything was hidden.
And maybe a bit more of a window.
But you'd have a bit more of the window. But it should have been slightly odd because you wouldn't have wanted to see the window because the intimacy of it, you don't want to be seeing outside a window because then your eye's drawn that way. And
I'm assuming you've stood in front of it. I mean, how many times have you?
I haven't seen that.
Because they say it will never ever leave. It has to stay there. It will never leave.
Yeah, there are some paintings that just don't travel. So
no, I mean, I can understand.
They got two Las Meninas by Goya, won't leave the Prado. There's the so-called Night Watchman in Amsterdam. That won't leave the Rijksmuseum. This will never travel.
Size or just complete value? I mean, if it is supposedly the best painting, I mean, gosh, what a thing to say! The best painting in the world. It's quite something. And
I don't. It's a tough one. That
yeah.
Why? I mean, sometimes if they're very fragile. I mean, size isn't necessarily. I mean, it's an inhibiting factor, but it's not a prohibiting factor.
Maybe they just feel if you want to see it, you come to us.
I think there's that. I think there's always the argument, which is true of any of these paintings. I mean, we're about to film a fantastic Van Gogh exhibition at the National Gallery.
Yeah.
October 2024, and some of those paintings, you think, how can the galleries are going to have a gap on their wall. People will be going to those galleries to see the Van Goghs, won't be there. Same with the Vermeers. That was the amazing thing about the Vermeer exhibition at the Rijksmuseum. They got 28 of the 37. But if you went to the Met to see a Vermeer, they weren't there.
Right.
For 3 months.
That's a funny question, Phil, but do you still get really excited about the fact that you're going to make that film in October? Like when you walk into that museum? Yeah, 100%. I mean, what a privilege.
I mean, it's happened twice recently where walking into the Vermeer at the Rijksmuseum was just extraordinary.
Yeah.
But actually, the John Singer Sargent in Boston, because I wasn't quite sure how that exhibition was going to work.
Yeah.
And I was a bit nervous about it. And as you know, we self-fund the films and they're very expensive and you just, But actually seeing those paintings, it was tremendous, actually.
And also the galleries, as you walk in, I mean, it must be because it's empty as such, even though you're with your people.
No, they're empty.
Yeah.
It's pretty empty. But the Van Gogh, I mean, I've seen the list of paintings, the agreed loans. They're staggering. I mean, that's going to be that. It's hard to say it's going to match the Vermeer, but it could give it a good run for its money. Yeah. Okay, so back to this one.
Back to the painting. Good old subject.
We have these characters, and again, I think it's part of the appeal of this is you're drawn in because you're thinking, well, what is going on? And you start looking at the narrative, you start looking at the clues, you start looking at the dresses. There's all sorts of, the vanishing point clearly is the guy in the background, and he has the white, his black silhouette, he's wearing black, so he's a silhouette against white, your eyes drawn there, that's your vanishing point. But to get to him, you have to go through all these other, look at those heads it's not an accident, you've got the one head lower right, and then another head going up. It's a diagonal line straight to the guy at the back.
But there's so many theories. It's like people are standing in groups of twos, people are standing in groups of threes, and then there's the lines, the paintings at the top.
Pyramid.
There's so much.
And it's and also if you get a chance just to zoom in on your whatever screen you're looking at, the ability with which he paints is just extraordinary. Velazquez is one of these painters that going close, it's just like daubs of paint, stripes of paint, and yet you come back out and it is the most beautifully rendered shoulder or arm or hand or fur of a dog.
But then it's funny, like you say, with the painting with the king and the queen, there's blurry with the mirror thing.
See, I think there's two things going on there. One that mirrors. I've got a mirror in this very room, which is not perfect.
No.
So getting glass is absolutely perfect is one thing. The other thing, though, is that if that was sharp, Velazquez, he knows about depth of field, and if that background is sharp, then actually it becomes confusing, because it wouldn't. All right, our eyes flick really quickly, so. If we were in that room, we could flick between the girl at the front and the couple at the back. But actually, if you take a photograph, most photographs with that amount of distance between the foreground and the background would be out of focus. So I think he's just making it deliberately feel like it's in the background, or he's being slightly provocative. The king and queen would have seen this. So what intrigues me is what would they have thought? They are the king and queen. Can you imagine a painting like this where actually, imagine our king. So King Charles, Queen Camilla. There can't have been a commission painting by them, because imagine if the main subject was the painter, who clearly is much more important than the two people in the background.
Of course.
Then the little girl, and then the maids, and then the two people on the right, and then imagine if that was Charles and Camilla in the background. It would feel almost on the verge of disrespectful. So again, I think that shows that Velazquez has great confidence in his position, that he's able to do this. He's clearly showing off. There's another detail which is very interesting. If you look closely on his cloak, and I think you were about to talk about this.
Well, I've got that down, I think. Yeah.
There's the red cross.
Yeah, I've got stuff everywhere, Phil.
Which essentially means that he's a knight.
Yes.
A bit more detail than that, but let's just say... And actually, at the time that he painted this, he wasn't.
That's what I've got down. The Order of the Santiago.
Order of the Santiago.
Knighthood. And,
So...
He was given it in 1659.
Yeah, so just before he dies. Now... Did he paint that on
exactly
to say I should be a knight, or was it painted on subsequently? I actually don't know the answer.
Well, that goes back to the theory of the artist then feeling like he was back to being important again.
Pretty bold.
Yeah.
Pretty bold because to be a knight, though he has these positions of power, though he is the court painter, the greatest painter in Spain, there's a lot of etiquette going on, and I don't think he automatically can just be made a knight. I'm sure that if he's paid for his commissions, maybe having paid work might have invalidated his ability to be a knight.
But King Philip IV, he loved him, didn't he? They got on like really, really well. So he would have got this painting. And was this his a child, the only one that was survived? and things like that. And didn't he keep this painting? He really loved it. So he would have seen then.
So that's
this is
the
not
only,
your
that's,
average portrait, and therefore.
Oh, sorry. Is that the only child
that survived? Yes.
Of Philip and his queen.
Queen, yeah.
Because isn't she his niece, the queen?
Oh no.
Is that right?
I didn't get to that video, Phil.
No, I
don't give me any more notes.
I got a feel. I think it's a slightly odd marriage.
Oh, okay. Well,
I mean, I don't know whether that. I mean, if he's married his niece. Anyway,
yeah.
that's interesting. So maybe what's commissioned. What was commissioned by the king and queen then was a portrait of their daughter.
Yeah, Infanta Margaret Teresa. Yeah. And I
read
think
that?
she was the only one that survived out of his children. Whether the others, anyone was still alive at that time, I do not know. But so yeah, I always question myself, which is why I rely on you, Phil. You know, sometimes I had these things I watch and I get notes, and then I always question myself. I said, well, years ago I would have gone to a reference library, got a really fancy book, and I would have trusted it. But sometimes I don't trust necessarily everything I read. But anyway, that's what I read. But I was under the impression that he absolutely loved this painting.
But that's
why.
why.
Therefore, yeah.
But that's why I'm coming back to, rather than us analysing the painting too much, it's like, why do people think this is so great? And I think there's two things there. One, if you imagine, as always, it's just a canvas.
Yeah.
And then it's a guy with a brush and some pigments and oil. And then you look at this.
And that's what he comes up with.
I mean, he's created a completely believable three-dimensional space with completely believable characters. It's not unique. You can argue this is true of Vermeer and many others, but Velazquez still is a master painter. This is, the more you look at it, that little girl could, she's completely three-dimensional. She could be skipping and dancing around. It's like a window into almost 4 centuries ago. But the other thing, and they always come back to this, is storytelling. We as humans love stories. Yeah. And we love codes that need to be... And I think actually with the My National Gallery film, it comes up time and time again with some of these fantastic stories that the members of staff or some of the other people we were interviewing in the film, it's finding all the codes in the paintings. And there's so many. There's a brilliant one with Terry Gilliam where the main reason for looking at the painting was because he used a foot in the painting in the Monty Python and the Holy Grail. Sorry, the Monty Python Flying Circus title animated sequence when the foot comes. And in fact, they used it when they wanted to end a sequence and start a new one. They'd have this foot coming out.
Yeah.
So he stole that foot from this painting. But actually, there's so much more to the painting, and actually, the painting, and he describes it in a completely, in a way that I completely buy, is actually a warning about syphilis.
Right.
But you wouldn't realise unless someone's pointing out, there's a character there, and in one hand they've got honey, in the other hand they've got a scorpion, and they're saying, if you eat the honey, you're going to get the scorpion. I mean, there's all sorts of things going on in this painting. So. The codes, the storytelling. Now, sometimes, as I said earlier, the codes are too obscure, like with religious texts that we might not know so well now. We don't always pick up on the codes. I've had somebody explaining to me in some of Caravaggio's work that, if the third finger can mean this, and if you've got 4 fingers out, I mean, it's very detailed. The suggestion being that people at the time would understand we need help. But this one, but if you don't know anything about it, and you're just walking through the Prado and you come across it, you are drawn into it and you think, wow, who are all these characters? Yeah. What is going on?
Well, you'd be sitting in there a long time, let me tell you, Phil. You'd be there for a week.
You do. No, you do. I mean, it's fantastic, isn't it?
It is. But it's funny, isn't it? Because he did Rokeby Venus as well, didn't he? And isn't there a question of the position of the mirror on that painting? Or do you not think so?
Might be.
They don't say that it necessarily reflects her face in that one. So here again, if your king and queen is standing there, then there's a question of how that's painted or reflected.
Oh, yeah.
You see.
Well, that's true. True, Vermeer. Sometimes people say that Vermeer was using a camera obscura or mirrors.
Oh no.
So
yeah.
so those rooms are not real because the perspectives don't work. So sometimes there's things reflected in the mirrors that in reality couldn't be.
I
So
just think, is he just trying to keep the mystery going by making the angle slightly odd?
But I mean, actually, if you were the king and queen standing behind this painting,
Yeah.
that's not what you're going to see. They'd have to be right in front of that.
Exactly.
Which is why somebody once suggested, well, maybe they're actually looking through a window. I don't think they are looking through a window because the size of their head is different to the... and I mean, it's almost possibly more likely that it's a portrait. I mean, if it's a portrait, I do like the idea because it's so kind of slightly bends your mind a bit.
Yeah.
But what Velazquez is doing is he's looking at a big mirror. So these 5 characters at the front are looking at themselves in a mirror.
Yeah.
But he's told them, look at the mirror, but don't move. And what he's doing is he's painting the reflection off the mirror, rather than just looking at them, rather than them being where we are,
Right.
and him painting, which is what you would normally do. I don't know why he would do that. And, I guess it makes it slightly less boring for those people because they can look at themselves.
But he's done exactly what he wanted. He's achieved what he wanted by the fact that we're still talking about his painting now.
And looking at him.
Yeah. And it's still classed as one of the best paintings in the world.
Fascinating.
I mean, that's always the hardest question to answer.
We did make a film about Velazquez, not for exhibition on screen, but one of our great artists. So if you want to know a little bit more, go to the 7th-art.com website and you can download that for a couple of pounds. Please do feel free to suggest the podcast to friends, family, neighbours, and anyone you happen to meet on a train or bus. If you're Laura,
if people have got theories,
send them to Laura. And I mean, anytime you get a chance to see a Velazquez, and particularly if you can go to Madrid and the Prado, can't recommend it enough. And that's why some of the artists that we have, some of these artists that we make films about, they could not wait to get to Spain. Manet, for one example, he was desperate to go to Spain to look at these amazing... Because Spanish paintings tended to stay in Spain, tended to stay at the Prado. It was a big deal when, towards the end of the 19th century, there was this exhibition of Spanish art in Paris. And, people were so excited to see the works of Goya and El Greco and Velázquez, of course. I mean, the Prado is somewhere that you can spend a long time walking around. And there's lots of other artists, Murillo and plenty of others that I haven't even mentioned.
But this painting influenced so many as well. Picasso, didn't he?
Dali. Exactly, lots of people do. Well, so we've just made a film about John Singer Sargent. And the Boyd daughters, as 4 girls.
Oh, yeah. They
say that is, John Singer Sargent is offering a nod towards this particular painting. So again, know your art history helps you understand what comes after. Okay.
I'm learning. I'm getting there, Phil.
See you next week.
Thank you for listening to the Painting of the Week podcast. For more information, please visit our website at 7th-art.com or contact us by emailing info@7th-art.com. See you next time.